welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we're diving into something really timely, pretty important actually, how the federal government is spelling out its response to what it sees as a major issue here in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, so our plan for this deep dive is to really get into a specific document. It's an executive order from President Donald J. Trump, just issued on August 25th, 2025. The title is Additional Measures to Address the Crime Emergency in the District of Columbia. We're going to try and break down the different actions being ordered, figure out which federal agencies are actually involved, basically make sense of what seems like a complex government response, put it in plain English so you feel properly informed, not bogged down. Okay, let's dig in.
Okay. And what jumps out right away is how this idea of a crime emergency really sets the stage for, well, pretty significant federal action. This order from August 25th, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It actually follows up on an earlier declaration, Executive Order 14333. That was from August 11th, just 2 weeks before, and that's the one that first declared this crime emergency in D.C. And the order is quite blunt about why they think these steps are needed. It talks about rampant violence and disorder.
Right.
And it claims these things have undermined the proper and safe functioning of the federal government and therefore the nation and led to, quote, disgraceful conditions.
That's pretty strong language.
It is. It frames this as not just a local D.C. issue, but something affecting how the whole federal government works. And that, that's the justification given for such a sweeping federal move and these further actions we're about to discuss.
Okay, so that emergency declaration is the backdrop. Let's get into the specifics now, the actual operational stuff in this new order.
Yeah.
Where does it start with, like, traditional law enforcement?
Right. The first thing it tackles is boosting the visible police presence. It orders the director of the National Park Service, yes, the Park Service, to hire more U.S. park police officers here in D.C.
Park police. So around the monuments and parks mainly.
Well, you might think that, but the order gives them a broad mandate. It says they need to ensure enforcement of all applicable laws within their jurisdiction, and that includes the D.C. Code, specifically to help maintain public safety and property.
Okay, so it's broader than just federal parks.
Exactly. It means more police presence, especially in federal areas, which, let's be honest, are all over D.C. And that increased visibility, the idea is it could ripple outwards, maybe make people feel safer day to day, on their commute or just being out and about. It's a clear signal the feds intend to be more visible.
Okay, more boots on the ground. But enforcement is only one piece, right? What about the follow-through in the courts?
Good point. Yeah, you can't just arrest people. The order addresses that too. It directs the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia to hire additional prosecutors.
And are these just general prosecutors?
No, they're specifically told to focus on prosecuting violent and property crimes. So the goal seems to be strengthening that whole chain from catching someone to actually prosecuting them.
Right, trying to speed things up.
Yeah, potentially reduce backlogs, maybe increase deterrence. Of course, that raises questions about, court resources. Can the system handle it? But the aim is clear. Process these cases faster. For anyone worried about crime, that promise of quicker resolution is probably welcome.
So boosting police and prosecutors.
Yeah.
But then the order seems to get a bit more, creative. It talks about federal recruitment and this task force. What's that about?
Yeah, this part is interesting. There's this DC Safe and Beautiful Task Force, remember, that was set up back in March by an earlier order.
Okay.
Now, this task force is told to create an online portal, and this isn't your usual job site. It's specifically designed for Americans who already have law enforcement or other relevant backgrounds and experience, so they can apply to join federal law enforcement agencies.
Huh, like a fast track for experienced people.
Sort of seems that way. It might be a way to quickly bring in people with skills, maybe bypass some of the usual slower hiring processes, especially if they feel there's an urgent need. It's an interesting approach. Could be efficient, could also, maybe pull experienced people away from local agencies.
Okay, that's the recruitment portal.
Okay.
But it also mentions creating actual new units within federal agencies.
Yes, exactly. Building on that, the order says that every law enforcement agency on that task force, plus other relevant parts of the Justice Department, need to immediately start setting up a specialized unit.
A specialized unit for what exactly?
The order says they're dedicated to ensuring public safety and order in the nation's capital. So focused on D.C., but, and this is a big but, they can be deployed whenever the circumstances necessitate, and also, importantly, subject to applicable law in other cities where public safety and order has been lost.
Whoa, okay. So not just for D.C.,
not just D.C. It really outlines a kind of federal rapid response team for public safety issues in cities. That signals a potential major shift, using federal teams perhaps more widely for urban safety problems. For people, raising families or just going to work, this suggests a higher level of federal readiness for dealing with disorder, potentially nationwide.
That's a really significant point, that potential nationwide scope. Now, the order doesn't stop with civilian federal agencies, does it? It brings in the military too, the National Guard. What's their role here?
You're right. The National Guard part is pretty extensive. It starts locally with the D.C. Guard. The Secretary of Defense is ordered to create and equip a specialized unit within the District of Columbia National Guard.
Similar to the federal agency unit.
Similar goal, yeah. Dedicated to ensuring public safety and order in the nation's capital. But here's a key detail. Members of this D.C. Guard unit can be deputized to enforce federal law, and they'd be activated under Title 32.
Okay, break that down. Deputized and Title 32?
Right. Deputized basically means they could be given federal law enforcement powers, like making arrests under federal law. Title 32 means they're activated on federal orders, paid by the federal government, but technically still under the command structure of the D.C. Guard leadership. So it's military personnel potentially acting directly as law enforcement in D.C. under federal direction.
So military police, essentially, for D.C. And you said this Guard piece goes beyond D.C.
Oh, absolutely. It expands massively. The order tells the Secretary of Defense to start ensuring that every single state's Army National Guard and Air National Guard are properly equipped, trained, organized, and ready to jump in.
Ready for what?
Ready to assist federal, state, and local law enforcement in quelling civil disturbances and ensuring the public safety and order whenever the circumstances necessitate. Basically, ready to help control unrest anywhere in the country.
Wow. So nationwide readiness for civil disturbance response.
Pretty much. It even specifies designating a certain number of Guard members in each state to be reasonably available for rapid mobilization. And then, on top of that, it establishes a standing National Guard Quick Reaction Force. A dedicated force trained and ready for rapid nationwide deployment.
A national quick reaction force.
Yeah, and that definitely raises big questions, about the Guard's role in domestic policing versus their other jobs like disaster relief or overseas missions. It suggests a future where maybe a local disturbance somewhere could see a very fast federal military response. It's a potentially huge shift in domestic security strategy.
It really broadens the federal toolkit. What's also striking, though, is how this order pulls in agencies you don't normally think of first when you hear crime fighting, like HUD Housing and Urban Development.
Right, and that shows this kind of whole-of-government thinking. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, gets a specific job. Investigate if the D.C. Housing Authority or any landlord in D.C. getting federal funds is failing on crime prevention and safety requirements in their agreements.
What kind of requirements?
Things like providing safe, decent, and sanitary conditions, or rules against tenants involved in crime that threatens other residents, drug dealing, violence, domestic violence, that sort of thing.
And what happens if they find problems?
The findings get referred to law enforcement. So for anyone living in or managing federally funded housing, this puts safety front and center. It's saying safe housing isn't just a side issue, it's a condition the federal government is now explicitly tasked with checking up on.
Okay, so housing safety is one angle. What about the Department of Transportation, DOT? How do they fit in?
DOT gets involved too. The Secretary of Transportation is told to conduct additional inspections, audits, and examinations. They're looking for conditions in federally funded transit here in D.C. buses, Metro, that might endanger transit workers.
Endanger transit workers specifically.
That's the focus mentioned, yeah. And if they find dangerous conditions, DOT is supposed to take appropriate remedial action. So this hits close to home for daily commuters, people relying on public transport, and obviously the workers themselves. It means federal oversight is now extending to safety on the bus or train.
So, like you said, a wider lens on public safety, housing, transit.
Exactly. It's looking beyond just street crime to these other environments where safety matters for daily life and public order.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's swing back to local policing. The order actually directs the Attorney General to look at the D.C. Police Department's own rules, right? The MPD.
Yes, this is a really interesting point about federal influence on local policy, especially given D.C.'s unique status. The Attorney General is directed to review the Metropolitan Police Department general orders.
Those are like their internal operating procedures.
Yeah, precisely. The rulebook for how D.C. police do their jobs. And after reviewing them, the Attorney General is supposed to, request that the mayor of the District of Columbia make such updates and modifications as the Attorney General determines are necessary to address the crime emergency.
A request to the mayor. How much weight does that carry?
Well, it's phrased as a request, but coming from the Attorney General in the context of a declared emergency and this executive order, it carries considerable political weight, let's say. It really highlights that tension between federal oversight and local control. For people living here, it could mean real changes in how MPD operates day to day, potentially aligning them more closely with the federal approach outlined in this order.
Got it. And finally, like any big government order, there are the usual legal bits at the end, right? The disclaimers.
Absolutely. There are standard sections called general provisions and severability. They basically say two key things. First, everything in the order depends on Congress actually providing the money. It's subject to the availability of appropriations, and it all has to follow existing laws.
So no blank checks.
No blank checks. And second, it explicitly states the order doesn't create any new rights or benefits that someone could sue the government to enforce. It's standard legal language, basically saying this is about directing federal agencies, setting policy, not creating new individual legal claims. It keeps things within existing legal and budget frameworks.
Okay, so wrapping this up, it's pretty clear this executive order casts a very wide net. We've seen it pull in traditional law enforcement, park police, federal prosecutors, but also housing, transportation, and significantly, the National Guard, both locally and potentially nationwide. It's a really coordinated, multi-agency federal push focused on this declared crime emergency in D.C.
Yeah, definitely. And we tried to just lay out what the order actually says step by step in a clear way. It really demonstrates how the federal government can mobilize a huge range of its resources when it frames an issue, even a local one like crime in D.C., as a matter of national importance because it's happening in the capital.
Right, which leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. As you see these kinds of far-reaching federal actions, this deep involvement of so many agencies, how might interventions like this change that balance, that tug of war between federal power and local control when it comes to public safety? And what could that mean down the road for how other cities across the country handle their own challenges? Something to definitely chew on. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.